Hello everybody, Intervision07 here. So I'm going to be doing kind of like a beginner's guide on this Legends of Runeterra. So this is like a newer game made by Riot Games based on like League of Legends and whatnot. Because Riot Games has been making a bunch of newer games. Because why not? They can. They're using their IP basically, or their champ. League of Legends, they've got a bunch of special characters unique to them. They've been using them for a bunch of other things, and Riot Games came up with this game that's kind of like a. If you had to pick like two games, like a card game that already exists, what this is kind of like heavily influenced by is like Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone. You kind of mush them together, and you kind of get a game like. They kind of take things from both of them, and you end up with a game like this. So I'd like to just give like a basic rundown of like how the things function in this game, and this is kind of just supposed to be for like someone who doesn't know anything about this game. If somehow they happen to find this, and I can give them some useful information, like they're struggling, they don't understand anything about this game, and yeah, that's kind of just like the whole point of this. So now, like me myself, I am not a expert at this game by any means. I've played this game pretty casually over the I don't know, like since this game came out, I've played it for a good bit, but it didn't take me that long to really pick it up because whenever I played Magic the Gathering, I was at one point a level 1 judge in the before times, basically before 2020 happens. I was a level 1 judge for Magic the Gathering. That was like a fun hobby for me. I really enjoyed like really taking the time to learn a lot of things about Magic the Gathering, so I can try to help other people out when they had questions. Now, I was wrong a lot of times too, even being a level 1 judge, just because Magic the Gathering's been around for 25 years, and you have like 16,000 ish cards or something like that, and a bunch of expansions and stuff. And every expansion they try to do some kind of new mechanic or something. Then there's like a bunch of weird interactions between old stuff and new stuff. And the biggest thing with Magic the Gathering is how things are worded is the biggest thing. So that's just kind of like a thing to note. But there's the two biggest things that I think Magic have influenced this game by are basically priority and the stack. Those are both in this game, and those are both like some of the nicest thing about Magic the Gathering, where like, oh hey, my opponent's doing something, I get a chance to try to stop it before it just makes me really sad. So like you can build your deck with counters in it, and you can actually get a chance to use them whenever your opponent plays something problematic. And that's kind of like the nice thing about Magic. Then there's like the downside to Magic, where sometimes it's just a natural thing of the game where someone's always just going to get mana screwed because they don't draw enough lands, or they draw way too many lands. In this game, you don't have that problem because your mana is just generated. So basically, like I started out, it goes like this: turn 1, I start out with 1 mana, and then it will go to turn 2, and then 2 mana, and then 3, etc., all the way up to 10. And then you've got this interesting mechanic in this game called like spell mana and stuff. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit more once we start playing stuff. So I kind of just want to go over like what types of cards there are and what they do. So if you can see here, there's 8 regions right now. So basically they had a region Bilgewater that was an expansion, and then added some new cards to each faction. And then just recently, Trigon is their newest expansion, where they added a whole new faction and a couple new champions for each faction here. So like Bilgewater, kind of like pirates, and yeah, got some pirates here. So like for people that are familiar with League of Legends, you'll recognize Fizz, Misfortune, Twisted Fate, Gangplank, and Nautilus. Those are all pretty notable characters from League of Legends for the most part. And yeah, so kind of, if I want to guess that, Bilgewater's like your pirates and whatnot. There's like some sea monsters, just kind of like Nautilus focuses on. Demacia here, I can show on those because there's a couple I don't have. Is like your well-trained, like elite, just type troops. Like you kind of look here. So this is a 1 cost, 2/2, and then it's elite tag. This is like efficient stats for that. That's kind of like their thing. Just efficient minions that can do cool things. They kind of have like a sub theme where they like units dying and stuff. like revenge and whatnot. Kind of like this here. So this costs 1 less for each ally that died this round, and then I summon a random 5 cost follower from Demacia. So ideally, you have 2 followers die, and then this is a discount for your 5 mana guy. That's kind of like a thing. Like you look here, so like you got this Blightsteel formation. So this is just a big, efficient, good stats. Really strong ability with give all allies barrier. I don't see this one much, but I think, that's kind of to give you an idea of like, like here. So tough is kind of like a mechanic with Demacia. So basically tough takes 1 less damage from all sources. So that's just, he actually takes 6 damage just to one-shot him. But the nice thing about this is it makes him kind of annoying to deal with. And it takes a little bit of extra. So tough's kind of like a Demacia. You'll see this a lot in Demacia, or the most. And it's kind of unique to them. And then there's like another one. So this is like one that cares about it if a unit died. So whenever I'm summoned, grants me lifesteal and tough, and Vanillite died. So if you see there, this is the same as this cavalry, Vanguard cavalry here. Except it doesn't have the elite tag, and there's a certain things that care about certain elites. Like this card here. So when this last breath is when this card dies, it creates a random elite hand, and you could get this guy. Or there's just certain cards with elite tag, like right here. This Cathar the Bolt got this elite thing here. So this Radiant Guardian doesn't have that, but Lifesteal is actually a really strong ability, especially on a minion. Like a 5/5 with tough and Lifesteals could be really hard for your opponent to deal with, because if they're trying to kill it with like a damage spell, it's hard to do that much, damage with the spell. You're usually going to be spending a lot more mana to kill it. And Lifesteal's nice because this thing can basically heal you up to your Nexus full, because each Nexus starts out at 20, and if they're at 10 or 7 or something, 1 or 2, this thing will probably at least get 1 or 2 attacks or blocks in, and this Lifesteal's a big problem. Healed back up. So yeah, this Radiant Guardian's a nice. If you get this Lifesteal and tough, it's really strong. And meeting this condition here isn't too hard if you build your deck for it. So that's kind of like what a Demacia is. Efficient guys, and they kind of got like a trait built around elites. So Freljords, like your ice and your barbarians and whatnot, and they kind of got frostbite's like a unique mechanic here. So that's just like them in general. So like this is kind of like one of the big frostbite champions here. So you've frostbited 5+ enemies. When I level up, create a crystal arrow on top of the deck. So I'll kind of explain real quick what this level up thing with champions is, and kind of like what a deck is real quick. So if I go here, I'll look for my frostbite deck, because I've got one somewhere. Freeze them all. Okay, so I'll edit this real quick. So I've already got Ash here. So if you look at this, so this is my 40 card deck. This is just Freljord. You can have 1 or 2 factions of any combination combined together. You can't have more than 3 though. So like I can go Trigon Demacia if I wanted to, or Trigon Freljord, or like Pittover and Zon and Shadow Isles. Excuse me. But I can't do more than 1 faction or 2 factions. So that's just kind of a thing to note. It's unlike, in Magic, where you have 5 colors, kind of 6, because colorless sometimes is a color. But you have the 5 main colors, and there's colorless that can be put in anything, or you're neutral. But you can have up to 5 colors in one deck. You have a 5-color deck. That's not as common. You'll usually see 3-color decks, which are like your most powerful, because you have access to 3 colors in Magic. That gives you like, you pretty much can do with anything at that point, because it will give you access to enough cards that, yeah. So that's kind of an interesting thing with this. So like in Magic, like if you get up to 2 colors, that's where you can get a powerful thing, but you'll still have weaknesses between, because certain colors can do certain things generally and can't do certain things. They tried to have kept like color identity, kind of where these factions have identities. So that's kind of an interesting, nice note to have here, where you can only combine up to 2 factions. You can't combine 3. Now, if you combine 3 factions, you have a lot more options for decks, and your decks could become you get a really efficient deck. You usually don't need more than 2 factions, because these champions you put in your deck usually are kind of like your objective of like what you're trying to do with your deck. Oh, Nivea got actually buffed. That's kind of cool. But so So if I look here, so I can kind of just look at his deck statistics. So, I've got, this is kind of like a thing called your mana curve. So I've got couple one cost, so I got 12 2 cost cards, 7 3 cost, 10 4 cost, 5 mana for 4 of them, and then I don't have any 6, and then I have a couple 7s. So you kind of want to see something like this. So this is kind of like what you would call like a mid-range, kind of like, this is basically a mid-range deck. So you've got like aggro, so just like from like Hearthstone, you can get a lot of deck types, or this is also from Magic the Gathering stuff. So you'll have like aggro decks where they're usually the curve's a lot cheaper, and they try to just finish off your opponent as fast as they can, and they might run some like direct damage to the Nexus spells to try to just finish you off. Like they want to get a good head start, hopefully get a bunch of damage in, and then they'll try to finish you off with like spells or some way to get some damage in at the end. Mid range is one you'll see a lot where you'll have a little bit of late game, but also strong early game, and it's just a mid deck. And then control decks are usually ones that have a lot of spells or minions that answer your opponent's threats. So kind of like just a generic idea how this is supposed to go is control is usually supposed to be aggro, because control's dedicated a lot of stuff in their deck to just try to kill your aggro stuff so they don't get aggro down. So that's what control is supposed to try to do. And then mid range is usually supposed to be just a little bit slower than aggro, so usually aggro will be mid-range. And then mid-range is supposed to beat control, because it's supposed to... Basically, your opponent will have, sometimes expensive removal for cards, and sometimes they'll have to use it on certain cards. So like, say that I've got a 4-mana mid-range card that my opponent has to use this removal on, but it costs, more mana than that to kill it. They can kind of out-tempo your opponent, and that's kind of the idea behind mid-range. You try to do like a tempo-y deck where you overwhelm the control deck and they die. Now, this is just a generic, these are like the 3 major types. There's also combo decks where you try to do some convoluted combo by waiting and getting a certain lineup of cards, and then you even have a combo where you try to like kill your opponent in 1 turn or something like that, basically. And until then, they usually play a bunch of cards that can like draw cards and whatnot, and just try to stay in there. Maybe some control cards. Some control decks can be also called combo decks. And combo decks usually will beat control decks, because usually the control decks will give them enough time to where they don't have a bunch of threats. So all of the spells in their hand that just kill units and whatnot are kind of wasted, because they're not that useful against the combo deck. So that's kind of like, how it's supposed to go. That's like a really generic, these are the type, isn't this cut and dry of what deck's what, but like I can pretty confidently say that this is pretty much a mid-range deck, or like a tempo-y mid-range deck. Because Frostbite's a very tempo-y ability. So yeah, I've got 6 champions here and a couple spells and 32 units, so that's like a nice split. One thing I will note about in this game, Legends of Runeterra, you really want to have some amount of spells, because there's this special thing called spell mana. So basically you'll end up, sometimes you don't get the greatest hand because it just happens, and you'll naturally store the spell mana, and you'll want some spells to use your spell mana on, or otherwise, to help you catch back up, because if you don't have that, that could be a big problem for you. So that's just kind of a nice thing to say. I think every deck I try to shoot for about 8-ish spells. But you could have more or less. And some decks don't have many. Some decks don't have any spells. But I'd say, I'm going to say for like your generic deck, you at least want a good selection of spells, so you can make use of that spell mana just in case you'd happen to store some spell mana, because ideally, whoever wins the game, if you're playing 2 of the same decks and have similar draws and whatnot, is whoever spends more mana. That's kind of like another good rule to go by. So, like, say, I went throughout the course of the game and I spent 75 mana, but my opponent spent 90 mana because I was just inefficient. My opponent, I would say, would have a higher chance to win that game than what I did. It's just like an example. Alright, so this deck here is, kind of Frostbite or Freeze them all. So this is based around Ash here. And each champion in this game has some of them have like this little level up thing. So you level up can be kind of look like it's a quest. And some of these champions will have things where you want to try to meet this like objective, and then if you do that, they level up and they become really strong. So Ash here starts out as a 5 mana, 5 attack, 3 health minion. So she's got kind of low health, but she does is pretty high damage. And she's got this effect here. So whenever she attacks, Frostbite the strongest enemy. So what Frostbite does is the unit's power is reduced to 0 this round. So it's real tempo-y where you just, if the opponent has a blocker that has like 4 attack, whenever she goes to attack, her attack trigger will go off. Kind of like in Magic the Gathering, the attack. So like when attack triggers will go off before the actual attackers and blockers fight out. So she'll just Frostbite something, reduce its power to 0, so it makes it really hard for your opponents to do something about it because, oh hey, my blocker will no longer kill something in return, so now I'm just kind of sad. And then she has this this level up condition here. You Frostbite 5 plus enemies. 5. Okay, so it's like you Frostbite and 5 plus enemies, or just after you Frostbite 5 enemies or more, she'll level up. And then she's got this thing when I level up, create a crystal arrow on top of your deck. So if I look here, this is what this crystal arrow is. So once you meet that condition, she'll level up and you'll get this on top of your deck whenever you play her and she levels up. Because she'll level up like as a play thing. This crystal arrow will go on the top card of your deck. It's a slow spell. I'm going to talk about the type of spells here in a second. But basically, crystal arrow Frostbite an enemy and all other enemies with 3 or less health and draw 1 card. So you lock one out completely, and then, you lock all the attack out on one. This could potentially just nuke your whole opponent's board for all their attack. So then you can attack. And your opponent's really sad because none of their blockers are useful for retaliating and killing things. And you also draw 1 card, so that's a nice card. And then she here has this nice effect of. So she gets the same thing, attack, Frostbite the strongest enemy. She still has that. Whenever champions level up, they normally get +1 attack and +1 health. There's a few champions that get special different keyword abilities. Like Frostbite here is a keyword thing. Strongest is a keyword thing. Basically, strongest is always the highest power, or if the unit's tied with the highest power, it will go high. So if I've got 5/5 and a 5/4, it will target the 5/4 because the 5/4 has a little bit higher health. Now if I've got 2 5/5s, and one costs 7 and one costs 6, it's going to target the one that costs 7. So that's kind of how this works for strongest. But now if I have a 5/5 and a 4/10 minion, it's going to target the 5/5 minion and not the 4/10. So that's important to notice. Highest power is strongest. So that's how the targeting works for that. And if there's 2 that are completely tied and everything, it will just randomly target one of them. Or I think it will target the one that was in play the longest. It's one of those 2. I actually don't know on that one. But she also has this aura effect here. So while she's in play, she has enemies with 0 power can't block. So now the kind of you can crystal arrow, and if you just lock all of your opponents little weaker minions, because this will Frostbite enemies with 3 or less attack. They can't just jump block your guys. It's kind of what it was called, or just placing a blocker in a way to not take damage from a minion that's significantly stronger than that minion. But she has this aura effect where, all of my minions will get through now, and they can't block. And this is a pretty strong effect here. And if you notice this here, so Ash's Flash Freeze, so Frostbite enemy, shuffle an Ash in your deck. So if I ever get 2 copies of Ash in my hand, because I have 3 copies of her in her deck, and I play Ash, one of the Ashes will turn into this. So I'll get this spell here, and this spell's actually a card here. So this is a burst spell where Frostbite enemy at burst speed, and then I shuffle an Ash into my deck. So the idea is since this card is really powerful, you can't stack up multiple of them. So that's the idea behind the champions. You get this spell they turn into, I can play this and then I'll get another Ash in my deck, so we're okay, so if this Ash eventually dies, I can draw her maybe again. So that's why, if you look at champions, they have this first spell here. This is Ash's Flash Freeze, and Flash Freeze is just a card. You look at Braum here. Braum takes, Braum's take cart, or just take cart. So, this is if I have 2 Braums in my hand. 2 Brahms in my hands. You know, and I play 1 Brahm because Brahm's just kind of unit you'll play early, and he'll just sit there and get value. You can't have 2 Brahms in play, so that's just kind of how that works. And a thing to note about this is it says you. So there's a wording thing here where this quest is counted throughout the whole course of the game. Ash does not have to be in play, and I don't have to frostbite 5 enemies while Ash is in play. I have to frostbite F5 enemies throughout the course of the game. To where if I look at a different champion, there's worded a little bit different. I can build the water here. So this, some misfortune here says, I've seen you attack 4 times. So this means she has to be in play, and you need to attack 4 times while she's in play for her to level up. And kind of like Twisted Fate here is similar. I've seen you draw 8+ cards. So this is only counted when he's in play. This isn't counted like here where you've cast 8 6+ spells. So this is always counted. This quest, quest here is always counted throughout the whole course of the game. To where this quest or level up condition is only counted when he's in play. So that's a really important thing. And the wording with this. So it's like I've seen you draw 8+ cards. He's got to be in play. To where Fizz is just always counted. He'll start counting. You could have 3 Fizzes in your deck, and they could all be at the bottom 3 cards. You'll complete this at some point, and that's just how this works. So that's kind of like an interesting thing to know with that. All right, so now I'm gonna go over the types of spells. So units, I can kind of talk about units real quick. Alright, so you see here, so I've got a unit here, it's 2 mana, 2 attack, 3 health. So how this works in this game, so like a 2 mana, 2 attack, 3 health minions, pretty solid stats. But like I can have basically 1 unit attacks, and then the blocker, your opponent gets to choose how blockers work, kind of like in Magic. So when you attack, you got to make sure you're not going to get yourself in a really bad trade. So like say I have 2 Portal Hoarders, and my opponent has this Avarosian Trapper who's just a 3/3. Attacking into that wouldn't be great because my 2/3 would die to this 3/3, and then he'd be left with a 3/1, and my guy would just die for little more value, unless I have a way to easily deal 1 damage. So that's like a thing to note. And once 2 units fight out, so say I have this 3/3 versus this 2/3. And, my guy dies, so he's like a little sad. But this 3/1 will just be a 3/1 until it even gets healed, buffed, or something. It's not like in Magic where after every turn, your units just go back to full health. Like, the damage falls off. So, like, if I have a 4/4 and it takes 3 damage, and the turn eventually goes around to my opponent, that unit will become a 4/4 again instead of a 4/1. But it's a 4/1 for that turn until the end of the game. So it's kind of like a thing that people who are used to Magic, there's like, that's not a thing in this. The damage marked on units will stay on it. So yeah, that's... And then he's also got this, when I'm summoned, draw a Portal card if you have a Portal ally. So that's kind of like a thing to note. Poros are like a... So this is a Poro attack here. They're like cute little balls of fur. But... yeah. So you can do like a little, so like this Freljord has like Poros is like you can build a Poro deck, literally. And that's how that works. So that, yeah, I mean, units are pretty straightforward. So this unit here has got some keyword abilities I'd like to talk about. This is a 2-cost 3/1. So like stat-wise, it's a little bit below the curve because normally like you'll have a 2-cost 3/2, and that's solid. So Overwhelm here is basically trample, but in this game it's called Overwhelm for people that are familiar with Magic, because Trample is a really powerful ability. It helps your big units, be threats, and you can't just chump block them. So like say I have this, and she's also got this Tough here ability where she takes 1 less damage from all sources. So say I attack with her as a 3/1 with Tough and Overwhelm, and my opponent tries to block it with like a 1/1 minion. It's like a 1 mana 1/1 or something. So the 1/1 will block this, but it won't deal any damage back because the damage will be reduced by 1. And then my opponent's Nexus will still take 2 damage because it only 1 health. There was only 1 health on this 1/1 to even block this back. So that's like trample basically. it makes it really hard for your opponent to chump block the bigger minions. So the higher attack there is, the more value you get out of Overwhelm, because you'll get more damage to your opponent's Nexus, and you win the game by reducing your opponent's Nexus health to 0. So this is like, yeah, so this is like a nice 2 caution. It's got 2 decent keywords here. You know, obviously she only has 3 attacks, so the Overwhelm sometimes will get a little bit of extra damage too. It's not as powerful on this Ruthless Later as it is like on. Let me just find a. There's some unit somewhere here that's up. Okay, so this unit here, this Alpha Wild Claw, is a 6 mana 7/6. So those are really efficient stats for what this costs. There's normally like a stats in this game. If the stats line up with the mana cost, that's considered like an okay minion, except for like your lower cost one. So like a 6 mana 6/6 with like an alright ability is considered a really strong minion. Or so you've got 1 extra attack here, so you get an extra stat. Or like if you get a 5 cost 5/5, that's not bad. That's pretty solid. That's kind of so that's how stats work. But this has Overwhelm again. So this has 7 attacks. So this unit's a lot harder to. This Overwhelm's a lot better on this guy since he's actually got threatening stats against like that Ruthless Rider who's only got 3 attack. So that's just something to kind of note about that. Okay, so I think that kind of you should be able to get an okay idea from like how units work and whatnot. Just like looking at a card and explaining it. There's lots of keywords. Every faction's got some unique ones. But I just kind of wanted to give a little quick rundown. So like I've got Mighty Poro here as a 3/3 with Overwhelm. Compared to the Ruthless Later. Sometimes the Ruthless Laters could be better than this if your opponent has a bunch of sources of 1 damage. Because of the tough, but for the most part, Mighty Poro's stronger in general. He's also got the Poro tag, which is really important. So this is kind of like a card here where Poros matter. So Poro ally grants Poro allies everywhere +1/+1. So it's got this everywhere thing here. Basically, for the rest of the game, no matter if you generate Poros, draw Poros out of your deck, or get Poros somehow from your opponent, they all get +1/+1. So that's everywhere is a really powerful like buff. So yeah. So now I'll go ahead and talk about some spells. I'm already here in Freljord, so I might as well just kind of talk about some here. So I'll go here and select spells. So if you look, you got units, spells, and there's champions. The champions are always units. Just the thing to note about champions is they're normally let me go back real quick. So I'm gonna go back to units. Champions usually have they're usually above the curve for their stats and their cost and their effects. So look, Ash here is so like Sejuani here is a 5/6 for 6, and she's got a really Overwhelm here, so she got that trample, and she's got a really powerful play up like a Frostbite and vulnerability. So like in general, champions should just be like solid stats and skills combined. Above. They're supposed to be above the curve a little bit. And that's just kind of the idea behind that. Alright. We'll go back to spells. So there's 3 types of spells in this game. So Magic the Gathering. So this is kind of where spells are going to come out of. You have sorceries and instants. Now sorceries usually are your slower spells, where you can only play them in your main phases, or basically before combat or after combat. You can only play them. And they usually will have more powerful effects for the mana you invest in them versus like against an instant. But they have a timing restriction where you can only play them like on your turn, and only before you attack or only after you attack. Where instants, you can play them like during your opponent's turn to try to mess up your opponent from hurting you and stuff. You can play them whenever you have priority, which you get priority every time your opponent does something. Let's say my opponent casts a 3/3 minion. I'll get a quick chance to try to do something, and then if I don't have anything I want to do, or just let it go. And yeah, that's how that's worked. So this game kind of is functionally similar, where your sorceries are your slow spells, essentially. These spells can only be cast outside of combat and other casting. The enemy can respawn. So let me just look for an example. So Avalanche here is kind of a good example of a slow spell. So this is deal 2 damage to all enemies. So say my opponent ends up getting a decent board where I'm like, oh, okay, they've got, this will kill, this might do like 1 damage to one of my guys, but it might finish all 3 of my opponent's cards. So I'm like, okay, playing Avalanche is pretty good. So I put this goes on the stack. Now my opponent gets a chance to react to this, whether he wants to play a unit for some reason. If he wants it to take 2 damage, he could. Or he could like maybe get a chance to heal up some of his cards to where they might not die to this, or buff them to where they won't die to this. Yeah, so that's how this works with slow. I'll go into an example of like how the stack works here in a minute, but I just want to give you a quick rundown of slow spells. So fast spells, which it looks like there's all burst, which burst is kind of something unique to this game. So there's actually, okay, oh, that's interesting. Thilior doesn't. I've got to have slow spells, don't they? No, they don't. It's even slow or burst. Okay. Well, Bilgewater here has got some slow spells. So here's a fast spell. I mean, so fast spells can be played at any time, but allow the opponent to respond. So this is like a generic instant card where I can play this anytime during combat or during my main phases, whenever I want to, and my opponent can still respond to this, but it's powerful because I can play this during combat, and that's I can try to like trick my opponent like. So say I've got a 4/4 minion and my opponent's got like a 4/5 of the block, and I'll attack with the 4/4. Well, most of the time my opponent's going to block with the 4/5, and I might be able to get that get them with like a little buff, like fast buff, to where like say slow spell. Okay, well let's just say I have a fast spell that deals 1 damage for really cheap. I can, get them after they commit blockers. I'll get a chance to play that deal 1 damage to that unit. So then the units will trade evenly, to where before, like I was going to get a downside. So that's just like an example. Okay, yeah, Make It Rain would be a good example here. So I can play this fast spells, deal 1 damage 3 times among different randomly targeted enemies in the enemy nexus. Let's say my opponent's got 2 minions in the nexus, so this will guarantee deal 1 damage to all my opponents. I can play this at instant speed, and then that would be really good because I'm getting not 1/3 of this card's damage is going to go to that 4/4 versus 4/5, and yeah, this would be a good example of that. And then my opponent also gets a chance to respond to this. Now there's something that's unique to this game, where your opponent can't stop it from happening. So if I go back, okay, I'm already on Bilgewater, where there's burst spells. So burst spells are the strongest spell type in the game. Well, they're basically instants. Burst spells resolve instantly. The enemy can't act before it finishes. So that's a really important thing to note, because I cast, so I'm paying 3 mana to give an ally +1 attack and +2 health permanently. Now sometimes this will make trades really in your favor, is the idea, like where you can trade up. It's also got this little thing, so when you draw this, it costs 1 less the turn you draw it. So sometimes it can be 2 mana, but paying 3 mana for the burst speed here is nice. So this can make my opponent really sad sometimes, where this just resolves, and then my opponent, if they didn't want the buff to happen, they can't do anything in return. Now they'll get like they might get another reaction to where they can still play a fast spell after this, but they can't play it. They can't stack it on top of this, and this is where the stack becomes important. So here's what I'm going to use as an example for the stack. So I've got this 7 mana spell here that deals 7 damage. It's got this toss 3, which this is for like a special like faction mechanic where you have a keyword called deep, and deep cares about having a specific, like a small amount of cards in your deck, and you want to try to get there. And then once you get units, so I will find a card with deep real quick and explain it. So deep is this keyword here. It says this unit, or I have +3/+3 once your deck has 15 or fewer cards in it, and your deck has 40 cards. So getting to this naturally in a game is really unlikely, because most games aren't going to last long enough to where you get the less than 15 cards in your deck. So the idea with this like deep thing is you play cards with like toss here, or if I go back to this, you play cards that remove cards from your deck to try to progress towards that deep, like win condition or something, because your minions will become a lot stronger. Because getting +3/+3 on all the deep units for there was a cost to you. You were playing cards with toss on them, but that's like the objective. It's like a strategy kind of. So toss synergizes with deep, and that's why I toss. Because if you look at this, obliterate the X top non-champion cards from the bottom of your deck. So it's not actually top, but the bottom of your deck, it just removes cards out of it. You might look at that and you think, well, that seems kind of pointless. Why would I want to remove cards out of my deck? Because in this game, if you go to draw cards and you have no cards in your deck, you just lose. Kind of like in Magic. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Because that's happened so rarely. And it's been a hot second since I played this game, but I'm pretty sure that's how toss works. Or how if you deck yourself, how it works. So you might look at that and you think, well, that seems bad. But that's actually, tossing is actually a good thing because you want to have synergies where your synergy is your deep, like skill word. So that's the idea behind that. So now that's explained, you can also see here, so like you can see fast is like the little boot that goes fast. You see slow, it's like a clock and it's trying to look slow. And then burst has got a little magic thingy. Just kind of to give you, so you know what type of spell it is by just looking at it. And those are the 3 kinds of spells. So now I'm going to explain kind of the stack real quick, or how it works. Because it's pretty much exactly identical in Magic. So I've got this scrap shot here, deal 7 damage units. So 7 damage is a pretty significant amount. Also, 7 mana is a lot for a spell. It is a fast spell, so that is nice to know. So ideally, I would want to use this to target like a 7 attack, 7 health minion. We'll just go generic 7/7 minion. So my opponent has a generic 7/7 minion. Let's just say it's their turn and they just played this. And it cost them 7 mana. So they had 9 mana total. So now they're at 2 mana. They have the 7/7 in play. I have 9 mana as well. And I'm like, oh, okay. I really want to scrap shot that and kill it. Because I don't want to try to block it. Because I don't have a good block for it. It's like I have like a 2 4/4s or something. So if I have to, I'll block with a 4/4. And I'll be kind of sad because the 7/7 just ate my 4/4, and I'm sad. I mean, it's not the worst case scenario, but let's just say, and my Nexus is low enough to where I can't just take the 7 damage and feel like I'm in a great spot. So okay, so my opponent's got the 7/7 minion, so now I'll get a chance to play a spell. It will go to my priority. I'll play the scrap shot targeting this, and that's a good use of scrap shot. So I'm going to be killing this 7/7 minion to target it. So now this is on the stack. So now my opponent gets a chance. They're like, okay. So like if this was a burst spell, this is where burst would be absurd. Because I can just play this burst, deal 7 damage to it. And then my opponent, it'll just die because my opponent won't get a chance to react to it. So that's kind of like a quick example of why burst is really strong. So back to this being targeted by the slow, or the fast, deal 7 damage to scrap shot, because I'm trying to defend myself by just committing the mana to keep removing it as soon as it's in play. So my opponent gets priority, and they're like, well, I don't want my 7/7 to die. And they've got this spell in their hand it could even be burst or slow speed, but it gives a unit +0 attack, +2 health. So I'll make this a 7/9. So what my opponent actually will do that, because that's not a bad play. So their 7/7 lives, and they're getting some value out of that. So that will go on the stack. So now it's currently going, targeting this 7/7, give this 7/7 +2 health, and then after that, it's going to take 7 damage from the spell. So now it goes back to me, and I get priority, and I'm like, well, I really don't want that unit to not die, and I have a unit that's 2 mana, deal 2 damage to it. So I'm going to stack that on top of the +2 health. So now it will go deal 2 damage to it. It will get buff 2 health, and then it will take 7 damage. And that's what the stack currently is. Now this can go as crazy as you want it to, but this is like as much as I want to explain here. So now everything is stacked up So how it works, like in Magic the Gathering, the stack will, once you keep adding to it, it will go back in reverse order, and it will go back that way. It won't be the 7 damage will happen first, it will happen last. So how it will go is it will be, so we're just going to assume all these spells are fast here, just to make this easy for explaining the stack. So it's going to go deal 2 damage to it, so the 7/7 will become a 7/5, so now it's a 7/5 for a split second. Then my opponent's give this unit +2 health spell will go on it. So now it's a 7/7 again. And then it will go to the scrap shot targeting it. And then the scrap shot will deal 7 damage to it. And then it will die. And now my opponents didn't have any, and that's assuming we didn't have anything else we want to do there. And that's the stack in a really basic case of scenario. So now I've got what I wanted, where the unit died and my opponent's probably sad because their unit died. We also committed a lot to both that there, and that's assuming we both had 9 mana and everything. But that's how the stack works in a scenario. So you want to keep in mind that it's going to resolve in the order that is done last. So the biggest thing was I knew that doing the 2 damage will go on it, and then it will be a 7/5 for a split second, so this +2 health buff won't make my scrap shot not kill it. And then I'll have to deal with it as a blocker. Because maybe it could be a 7/7 with Overwhelm, and I might just lose with the Overwhelm there. So that's explaining spells in a stack in kind of a simplified-ish way. So that kind of goes over as like a basic rundown of units, kind of champions, like their little level up condition, their like quest, and then spells. So I'm just gonna go ahead and play a deck. I kind of talked about the Ash here, so I'm just gonna play the deck based around here. So I'll just kind of a quick rundown everything. So I've got like Omen Hawk here. This is just a pretty solid 1-drop. Avaricious Sentry is a solid 2-cost minion. It gives me some card draw because it last breath it draws one, and it's just nice. It's a nice cycle card. This is one of the cards that actually helped fulfill my quest. So I play this. It's a 3/1, and then it frostbites enemy, and that's frostbite enemy. Yeah. So as you can see, Frostbite doesn't really cost much in a card. It's only costing this unit basically 1 health. If 2 mana 3/2 was just a average stats or good stats, this has 1 less health because of it. Because Frostbite is a pretty strong ability. I've got the Shatter. So since I have a lot of Frostbite, this is a card that has like a payoff for Frostbite enemies. So it's a slow spell, but it deals 4 damage if the enemy has 0 power, otherwise Frostbite. So I can use this as a Frostbite, or ideally my opponent's minions will have 0 power because I'll Frostbite them with something else. And then I have 2 mana deal 4 damage, which is really efficient. That's a really efficient damage ratio for mana invested. Now I've got Stalking Wolf. So this is a 3/2 of Challenger. So Challenger is a really strong ability where normally my opponents get to pick blockers as attacking, but basically with Challenger, I get to pick who blocks this Challenger unit. And that's really nice, as it turns out. Because what you'll end up running into with Frostbite is I'll Frostbite my opponent's minions. So a lot of the time, if something's Frostbite they really want to block with, they're just not going to block with it because they don't want to lose their unit for free. And they just let you get some damage in. But with this Challenger here, I get to pull the Frostbited unit with the Challenger and attack it or get free damage on that Frostbited unit because I won't take any retaliation damage. So that's why I've got this Stalking Wolf here with this Challenger. And the Stalking Wolf actually has a downside because a 3-attack, 2-health minion with Challenger for 2 mana is actually that strong. So when I'm summoned, the enemy summons a Snow Hare, or they get a free 1/1. So even with that downside, this unit's strong enough with Frostbite that I like to have it in this deck. So that's the idea behind Challenger. And that's one of the natural Challenger cards in the deck. There's not a lot of Challengers in Freljord. There's a lot more Challenger in like Demacia, and it's kind of like just all over the factions, but it's not super prevalent in Freljord. But that's one of the units in Freljord that happens to have it. So this Avarician Marksman is just a solid guy. Again, he's got the 3/1 stats, so kind of more aggressive stats, but just deal 1 damage. So when you play him, it's kind of the same thing as a slow spell in a way. It will actually go up here, show slow. So basically it's like a little spell-like effect when this unit's played, where I'll play this, I'll target something, it deals 1 damage to it, and then my opponent gets a chance to react to it because there's this slow spell. It goes on the stack real quick. And, sometimes my opponent's like, hey, I don't want you to ping off my guy, so maybe they'll heal it or buff it, or they get a chance to. So that's kind of the thing to note with play effects. They're kind of like a mini spell effect that goes on the stack for a second that the opponent can react to. Or like this here. This doesn't go on the stack, it just happens, Because it doesn't... It says when I'm summoned, not play. So when I'm summoned, it will just happen, where play, my opponent gets a chance to react to it with this slow spell that kind of goes on the stack for a hot second. Same thing with this Frostbite. Well, it says Frostbite an enemy, play. Okay, so it's got a speed here. That's something that's interesting. So since this has this little symbol here, I think this is trying to symbolize... Well, no, this is burst. Okay, well, I'm confusing myself on this now because this shows slow. Huh. Burst. Okay, Riot Games, what the hell? So, from my experience, when you play a unit, your opponent gets a chance, I believe, to do something about this 1 damage. I was kind of saying things and I'm not sure. Either way, this unit has a 3 mana, 3/1, and deals 1 damage or something. It's pretty strong. This is a baseline. So I've got Flash Freeze. So this is just Frostbite enemy at burst speed. So the best thing this is used in. So say I've got a 3/3 minion attacking and my opponent blocks with a 3/3. You know, so that's a pretty neutral minion versus minion thing. We're like, okay, whatever. So I can Frostbite this at burst speed. Or instant speed, but it's burst speed, so it just happens. And then my opponent's block. Once my opponent's block's committed, I'll play this, and then they'll have a 0/3 now with 3/3. My 3/3 will just kill it for free. So I kind of use this spell, you know, as a 3 mana burst, deal 3 damage to that unit and killed it. Now this obviously gets better the bigger the minions you have and stuff. So that's kind of like this is like a combat trick in a way, where it just helps you get efficient trades and stuff, and yeah. Now this Rhymefang Wolf is similar to Stalking Wolf, but this is like one of the big payoff cards for having Frostbite. So it's got that challenger where I was saying how you can pull Frostbite at enemies with it, just get free damage on it. Well, this guy's got this special strike ability. So basically, strike is there's like Nectic Strike is a certain thing, so it only will go off whenever it deals damage to the enemy's Nexus. Where strike will just go off when it deals damage to units or Nexus, but it doesn't matter because Nexus doesn't have power. So it's got this strike here. If I struck an enemy or a unit with 0 power, kill it. So that's really strong because I can frostbite my opponent's 5/5 and then pull it with Challenger and his Rhymefang Wolf, and his Rhymefang Wolf will just kill the 5/5 if it's frostbitten, because it'll be a 3/2 and it'll normally only take 3 damage, but it'll actually take 5 damage and die. So that's why this Rhymefang Wolf's really powerful. And like our Frostbite synergy. We've got Ash here, who just Frostbites things. So this is so a 3 mana 3/3 with Overwhelm is bad just as a baseline. But it's got this Allegiance ability where the reason why I have all Filiord and not 2 factions is because this Allegiance here. So grant the top ally of your deck +3/+3 at Overwhelm. So it doesn't give itself a buff, but the top card of my deck gets a really big buff when I play this. So giving any of my units +3/+3 at Overwhelm makes it a really big threat for its mana cost. And then this is okay, enough stats. That's kind of like a thing with Freljord. They like to buff the top card of their deck. So you kind of noticed with Omen Hawk, when I'm summoned, grant the top 2 allies in your deck +1/+1. So that's kind of a similar. That's kind of like a Avarosian or Freljord like mechanic. And then I've got this buff here. So this is like the power. This is like a powerful, health buff. So it goes +0, +3. So the +0 is attack, and then the +3 is health. So that's how that always goes. So if this was like +3, +0 here, it'd be +3 attack, and then nothing. It wouldn't affect health. It could also be minus. I don't think there's anything that gives minus in this game, but that's how that works. So you're looking at 4 mana to give 2 of your allies +3 health. And this is permanently. It doesn't say until end of turn. So once this buff's applied, they're just permanently at +3 health. But this is nice because this is burst, and the burst is really powerful with buffs. So even though I'm investing 4 mana into +6 health across 2 units, isn't like the greatest value for it. But basically, I can play this, make one of my guys not die, and maybe protect something from, dying from a spell. So this is a nice. I've only got 1 copy of it in the deck, but it's nice to have this. Like, I don't want too many of these, but when this is strong, this is a really powerful effect. So I've got. Okay, there's a lot of. So I've got Braum here, and Braum is just a solid. He's not here as much of a strategy with like my Frostbite synergy, but he's just a solid unit. He got this challenger, but he doesn't have any attack unless he levels up. But Braum here is kind of like a win condition almost, where I just let Braum do his thing throughout the game, and eventually he becomes a really big problem for my opponent. So he's got Challenger here and Regeneration. But he has 0 attack and 5 health. And you might be wondering, well, why is Challenger good with this? So Regeneration is heals fully at the end of each round. So this is kind of like how Magic the Gathering units are, where at the end of every round, if the unit doesn't die, it just heals back up. As you see, he's got his level up condition here. So he's got this, the first time I survive damage, summon a Mighty Poro. So let's... Oh. Okay, so Braum got changed a little bit recently. So he's actually got... he used to only do this when he levels up, but now he just does it all the time. He used to be a little bit cheaper. His level up isn't any stronger. Well, he gets +1/+1. So that's kind of cool. So basically, the reason why he's got this Challenger here, so he wants to pull blockers from the opponent, because your opponent's blocker can be kind of stalled by Braum, as Braum will pull one of the blockers and they can't be used to block something else. And he's got this Regeneration with 5 health, so he can, just take a 3/3. And, he'll heal back to full health at the end of the round, so it's not that big of a deal for him. But he's also got this nice text here. So ideally you want him to survive the damage, and then he'll summon a Mighty Poro. And that's a really powerful effect, because every time he survives damage, you're just getting a free, 3 cost, 3/3 with Overwhelm. And that's pretty nice as it turns out. And then his level up is he survived 10 total damage, so he'll just slowly progress the quest and, get you Mighty Poros. And then when he levels up, when I survive damage, it's the same thing. Then he just gets a little bit more health to make him a little bit harder to deal with. So Braum used to be like an inevitable. He used to only do this when he leveled up. He would have this survive damage, but now he's a little bit more expensive. But I think it's kind of a buff to Braum. It's like a rework to him. So yeah, that's a powerful If your opponent can't do extra damage to Braum to finish him off, this will eventually just get your opponent. Braum can be a win condition kind of in some scenarios where you just overwhelm your opponents with Mighty Poros because they can't deal with Braum. And they might not have they can't attack you because they just don't want Braum to block for free and get you more Mighty Poros. So that's what Braum's here for. So we've got this Avarosian Heart card, or kind of similar effect to the other one. So when I'm summoned, grants all allies in your deck +1/+1. So that's just everything. So this is a solid 5 mana, 5/5's okay stats. And then it's got a really powerful effect when summoned. This Ice Yeti is another Frostbite type card. So when I'm summoned, Frostbite all enemies with 3 less health. So this kind of just Frostbites all of their weak blockers to where, yeah, it makes it annoying for, your opponent might still chump block your stuff, but it makes it really awkward. And you see this is a 7 mana 5/5, and that's kind of poopy stats for the mana cost, but this summon effect's really powerful. Then you got Winter's Breath, so this is like the Big Daddy Frostbite card here. So kill all enemies with 0 power. So ideally you'll frostbite a bunch of enemies and then you just kill them off. Or it frostbites all enemies. And if you frostbite all enemies, that can make your opponent really, really sad, where they're forced to commit blocks they don't want to. And their units are just probably going to die for free or take a bunch of damage. So this Winter's Breath's a powerful spell. So yeah, that's the kind of an explanation of everything. I will actually go here and play. I'm going to play a match against the AI with this deck to explain what's going on and whatnot. Oh well, I guess I'll just make this a long guide episode because we're committed this far. So with against an AI here, I can kind of go at my own pace and just explain things. So it's kind of funny. The AI I'm going against is a mirror match, or it's the same type of deck I'm doing where they're trying to do a frostbite strategy. Their deck probably has different cards in it. So when you start, you can mulligan. So I can replace all of these if I have to. I think this is a unit I didn't talk about here. But this Rhymestruck Shaman has got a powerful round start, frostbite the strongest enemy. So this can just lock down an opponent's unit while this is alive. So this is really powerful effect. This is, if you see here, it's a 5 mana 3/3. So that's bad stats, but this effect's really powerful. So I want to keep this Avarosian Sentry here because it's just a good card to play on too. And I might keep one of these Stalking Wolves. I don't need 2 of them. I've already got 2 drops. I don't need more of them. I like to get more expensive cards or 1 drop, so I'm going to replace these 2. And that's mulligan, so those will go away, and then I'll get different cards. So now I've got a 1 cost, and I got Ash, one of the cards based around deck. So it goes my opponent. So how this works in this game is attacker is every other round, and mana goes up every round. So right now it's turn 1, so my opponent can attack with this 1/1 he played. So I'm going to play an Oven Hawk too. Spent my mana. So now he probably will attack with it. So now I can block. So see, if I don't block, I can just take the 1 damage. But, you know, this is a pretty neutral trade, and I'm not real sad about it. So I'm going to commit my blocker, and then they'll just hit each other, and then they'll die. There you go. So now, see, I pass here. I have like auto pass on if I can't do anything. So now notice how it's turn 2, or we're at 2 mana now, and it's my turn to attack. My opponent can't attack. So that's kind of a unique thing with this. This will go between each turn. So like next turn it will go here. My opponent can attack at 3 mana. So that's something to note. So I can play one of these and my opponent can play something in response. I will develop the Stalking Wolf and see what my opponent develops. Because if I just eat this rabbit for free, that's fine. Okay, so this is where Frostbite's like tempo. So now me attacking is really bad because I have a 0 attack minion. So now I'm just not going to kill this snow hare for free. And it'll just sit there. Ooh, so Braum is a really good unit to get buffs on. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. So I can play this, or so I'm going to pass here, and I might wait to try to use this. Okay. So Owl Frostbites. So this is where Frostbites. This is the greatest use of this, but this is where this works. So I could Frostbite this, and this 2/2 would normally kill this, but now I get to kill it for free. Well, I'm gonna take a little bit of damage there, but that went good for me, so I just killed his unit. Alright, 4 mana. So this Braum's really strong here, so I'm gonna play this and hope my opponent doesn't have a way to deal with it. If he doesn't have a good answer to this, is okay. So that was actually if I was my opponent, I wouldn't have played this here because this 5/3 is really vulnerable to this 2 attack 3 health challenger. I'm about to show you what. So I attack, I can force my opponent to block this, and this is a really good trade for me. I'm using my 2 mana card to kill his 4 mana card. And then Braum here, I can just pull this Snow Hare here, and then Braum will kill it, and then trigger his Mighty Poro thing, and that's really strong. So yeah, that AI isn't always the best. And this is where Braum has really, now this Braum's a really big problem for my opponent. We'll see how I got +1 health there, and he regenerated. So my opponent didn't do anything. So it went to his attack thing. He doesn't want to attack in the Braum. And he didn't want to develop any units. So this Braum's takes hard. So putting buffs on Braum is really strong because that regeneration will scale with his health and then just how he works. So I consider putting Braum's take heart whenever I can because it gives a damaged ally +3/+3. So the spell mana here, if I don't spend any of my mana, I'll get 3 spell mana next turn. And it's like so say my opponent here had 1 extra mana they didn't use at one point in the game. So now I've got this spell mana that can only be used to cast spells. So he could cast a 6 mana spell here if he wanted to, but he couldn't. And spells will always use spell mana first. So if I wanted to, I could like store 3 spell mana and just play this Avarosian Sentry. And I might want to keep this burst 3 mana spell here. I might just want to save up for that. So that's what I'm going to do. So even though I didn't spend all my mana, I still have this spell mana going forward, and I actually have a spell in hand I can do something with. Okay, so this Avarosian... Alright. So I'm actually going to attack with everything first, because I don't... So there's a thing that's interesting to note. So like even though I can attack, I could play this Avarosian Hearthguard and give my... an attack with a 5/5 here, or immediately. But the thing is my opponent isn't in a great position here to help deal with what I've got attacking him, because Braum is just going to pull this and get more value out of making more free poros. But if I play this, I'm going to give my opponent priority for a second to play something here, and I don't want my opponent playing anything. So playing cards here isn't a great strategy. So I'm going to do this first, and then my opponents can only play fast cards here where they couldn't play slow cards, and they're really sad. Oh, okay, I understand now. The first time he ever survives damage, summon a Mighty Poro, and then when he levels up, it's whenever I survive damage. Okay. So this Braum was changed recently, so I'm still figuring out how this works. So this is like a wording thing. So the first time he survives damage, he gets a Mighty Poro, because I thought this is still really good, but I thought it was insane. So when he levels up, it's every time he survives damage, he gets a Mighty Poro. So that was kind of me misreading that. So Braum is a little really strong now. Alright, so my opponent played the 6-cost 6/6 with Overwhelm. So see, if I played this, I would have to attack into the 6/6, and that means my Mighty Poro and my Avarosian Sentry and my 5/5 probably. I still probably would have attacked with everything because I could have finished it off. But that's just kind of an example. Like, well, maybe I didn't want to do that because I didn't want this to potentially eat my 5/5. So now I can just play my Braum Stakes Art because I really want to buff this guy up because my opponent hasn't a good way to do it. So the higher stats this guy has, because Challenge and Regeneration is a powerful combination of skills. Alright, so my opponent's playing a slow spell here. If you have a Yeti, summon and raise Yeti. So he played a 3 mana 5/5 basically. Yeti. I had nothing I can do in response to that. Alright, so now that my opponent's developed stuff and they've spent all their mana, I've seen what they can do. I guess I'll just play this Avarosian Heartguard. 5/5 is not bad, I guess. Huh? So now I've got really good defense to where my opponent does not want to attack into this Braum. This Braum is at 4 out of 10. Okay, so they played Ernick. Or just solid stat minion. Yeah, I don't have anything I want to do here. That's super, like, I want to do this now. Because I want to play Ash when I'm about to attack and I don't have the attack thing. I think at the end of the turn, I might just develop the, I'll develop an Ash, probably. And Ice Yeti isn't useful because all of his minions have more than 3 attack. So I'm just going to pass. I started attacking with everything. I'm not super scared about that. So I'm going to use Braum. So he's got 9 health here, and the 6/6 with Overwhelm isn't just going to get by this, and he'll do some free damage there. And then I'll use the 5/5 to block the 5/5. And I really don't need to take 5 damage, so I'm just going to block with the Avarosian Heartguard, because then I'll get to draw a card. So now my opponent's offensive here is pretty halted. So whenever champions level up, they do this. So now Braum is a really big problem for my opponent. This is where Braum's like win condition kind of kicks in, where Braum can just carry today because I put some buffs on him, and every time he survives damage, I'm just going to be getting free 3/3s, and that's pretty strong. So this is a card I drew, so that's actually not bad. So I'll play this, buff some of my units to the top of my deck, and my opponent didn't play anything there. And I'll just throw the stronger Ash.
Let me tell you about Avarosa.
So sometimes they talk. And then see, this Ash turns into Ash's Flash Freeze. So now I've actually got another option instead of another Ash. I haven't really frostbited any of these. Okay, so I frostbited 105. So normally it goes a little bit faster than this, but I've just goes with the hand I got. So playing this Iceglaive Archer to like frostbite one of these is actually not a bad play, but Ash is going to automatically frostbite this. And I have this Flash Freeze to nullify this Bull Ernick, so Ash isn't that threat of dying. So I'm just going to attack with everything. Alright, so there's an interesting thing to note here. So this is so I'm going to be attacking with this, and it's showing Ash is going to frostbite that. And so if I pull Braum here, that's not great for Braum because this will be frostbited, and Braum actually it will still work. I think survives damage only triggers on taking damage, so he'll take 0 damage. And okay, this actually isn't bad. So if I remember right here, this will be a 0/2, and then Braum will hit this, and Braum will still summon a Mighty Poro, and this makes Braum less likely to die. So where if Braum was taking 6 damage here, my opponent gets a chance to deal 4 damage to Braum and finish him off. So I'm pretty sure this is going to get frostbitten, be a 0 attack, hit Braum, do 0 damage, and then I'll summon a Mighty Poro. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. I could be wrong there. And this Mighty Ernick isn't... So Mighty Ernick can block here, and that's a problem, but I kind of want to bait my opponent into blocking this so I can get a good use out of Ash's Flash. So I'm committing my attacks, so Ash is going to do her little freeze thing, so that's what happened here. This is where Ash's Flash Freeze is really good. So I can just do that. My opponent can't respond to that. And now they get priority to try to play slow spells there. But, you know, I mean, my opponent just got absolutely pooped on there, basically. So at this point, I'm getting low on cards, but I got such a big tempo advantage. So I was wrong with survives damage only triggers when he takes damage. So that was... I didn't remember how that worked. But it's okay to be wrong. So it's kind of a fun little combo here. So I can play this, frostbite this little enemy, My opponent's got some spells they want to play, so they're frostbiting this Ash. Some. Ooh. Okay, so that was actually good play on my opponent. So they killed Ash doing that. And so now I get the chance to play a slow spell, so I can finish off that with the frostbite I applied to it earlier. So what my opponent did there, they frostbited all my units to 0 attack, but they frostbited Ash first, so Ash actually died. They probably should have used it on Rom to kill him, but that's whatever. Yeah, this is where Braum is just... Yeah, Braum is just carrying the dares. He's going to use his magnificent mustache here to make me really sad. Or make my enemy really sad. So this isn't super useful here. I'm just going to hold on to it. So I've got 2 expensive cards here. Now I've got a bunch of mana. I've got such a big lead on my opponent. So you can only have 6 units, so this Poro will probably just spawn and be sad. But I did so much damage, I just won the game anyways. So I reduced my opponent a lot with -7. And there you go. So that's Legends of Runeterra. I don't know. And maybe if this gets decently received by people by just trying to explain things, I might do more videos in the future of different decks and their strategies, because I spend a lot of time just talking about the basics of the game and stuff. But if I go here, all of these factions have different decks that have different strategies, and you want to, you know, just, yeah, there's all kinds of strategies out there. There's 8 factions. They all have their own thing they try to do, and yeah. So that's going to be kind of the end of this. So thanks everyone who did watch this. I hope this guide was useful to you, and well, maybe watch more of my stuff if you want to. Until next time, bye-bye.